Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's council meeting for Monday the 23rd of April 2018. Could we all stand for the opening prayer and acknowledgement to country, please? Lord, we ask that you guide us in our decision-making, protect us and the community we serve from all that is evil, and strengthen our unity for the welfare of the city. Amen. I'd like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people as the traditional custodians of the land that we meet upon today, and pay my respects to the elders, both past, present and future, for they hold the memories, the culture and tradition and hopes of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that contribute to our community. Thank you. This council meeting is being webcast and recorded. By speaking at this council meeting, you agree to being recorded and webcast. Please ensure that if and when you are speaking at this council meeting that you are respectful to other people and use appropriate language. AlburyCity accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during the course of this council meeting. An audio recording will be made for administrative purposes. CM3, conflict of interest declarations received by the Chair and disclosure of political donations. I have one conflict of interest declaration. It's from Mr James Jenkins. Non-pecuniary, significant. Brief description is I am the public officer of Albury Conservation Company who have made a submission for financial assistance. There is CM 14.2 draft 2018-19 financial assistance budget. Leave the chambers for this agenda item. Thank you. Mr Zachnich.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. This advice to the council meeting relates to political donations and requirements under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. The Act under Section 147 requires a person submitting planning applications or submissions regarding a planning application to disclose any reportable political donation and or gifts to any local councillor or employee of council. Reportable political donations include those of or above $1,000. The disclosure statement forms are available on Council's website or from the Customer Service Centre and must be lodged in accordance with the Act. The forms are also available at the back of the chamber during meetings. In dealing with development applications, councillors need to take into account specific matters contained in the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979. Accordingly, the provisions of 79C1 of that Act are set out in the Council Officer's report detailing issues to be considered. The Local Government Act 1993, Section 375A requires that a division be called whenever a motion for a planning decision is put at a meeting of the Council or a Council committee. Planning decision means a decision made in the exercise of a function of Council under the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act, including a decision relating to a development application, an environmental planning instrument, a development control plan or a development contribution plan under that Act, but not including the making of an order under Division 2A of Part 6 of that Act. Matters appearing in the Planning Development Committee meeting minutes which require a planning decision to be made will be dealt with separately and immediately following the motion for the adoption of the Planning and Development Committee meeting minutes. In respect to these matters, motions for a planning decision put before Council will be considered a division and recorded in accordance with Section 375A of the Local Government Act 1993. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Zachnich. Sam, for apologies. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to move that Council receive, note and accept the apologies of Councillors Van der Ven and Cameron and grant leave of absence for the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Action Plan CM6. Happy to receive these as a block. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Mr Mayor, I move that the following action plans be received and noted: actions to complete, actions in progress and long-term issues.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Stutchbury.
Happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
No further questions or debate. Happy to put those. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. CM7, the confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. CM 7.1, minutes of the council meeting held on Monday, the 26th of March 2018 at 6 p.m. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Move the recommendation that the minutes of the council meeting held on Monday, 26th March 2018 at 6 p.m. be confirmed.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Councillor Thurley.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Doxey, do you wish to speak to those at all?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. No further question or debate. Happy to put that. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Just getting up to planning. We have the report from Planning and Development Committee meeting held on Monday, the 9th of April. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to move the recommendation as a motion that the recommendations included in the report from the Planning and Development Committee meeting held on Monday, 9 April 2018 be adopted except with items PDC 7.1 Development Application 10.2017.35200.1 alterations and additions to adult entertainment venue 727 Drome Street, East Albury, with such matters being dealt with separately, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thank you.
I have a question. Just stand by. Councillor Thurley, your question.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It basically relates to the new planning process that we've undergone that council has requested that applications come to us. Can I ask the relevant staff member, how many councillors have responded to the first two reports that we were given by Mr Keys?
Mr Dudley.
Through you, Mr Chair, thank you very much for the question. In regards to week one, my understanding is we have received 5 responses, to which they related to staff delegation. In week 2, there were 4 responses. One was in relation to Electra Street and removal of trees. The second one was staff delegation, and then there were 2 about the development control plan. And certainly my understanding, these issues will be considered by council at a workshop in the very near future.
Have any follow-up?
No, thank you.
Okay. With that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. CM 8.2, report from Engineering Works Committee meeting. Oh, sorry, the DA. The DA. Nearly forgot the Drome Street DA. Okay, councillors, we need now to put the motion in relation to the development application, which is, we got another motion there, or we? Okay, thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation as a motion from the committee meeting that with reference to PDC 7.1 Development Application 10.2017.35200.1 alterations and additions to adult entertainment venue 727 Drome Street, East Albury, that the committee recommends to council that council receive and note this report and grant consent for Development Application 10.2017.35200.1, subject to the conditions and contained in the draft determination attachment 4. Mr Mayor, I move that we receive and note that.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Thurley.
Second that motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, I have a question. Did you open debate first?
That's fine, thank you.
Councillor Starch, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is directed to the relevant member of staff. I was having a look at this DA very carefully as at the committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, there was the unusual occurrence of 2 councillors voting against the DA but not speaking against it, and it made me wonder if there was an issue. So I went back and had a careful look at the DA, and I noted that the name of the applicant on the DA is not actually the owner of the property. And I have, I suppose, 2 questions for the relevant member of staff. The first question would be, is this unusual that the owner of a property has a DA apply for that property in someone else's name? And if so, in this particular case, does the relevant member of staff have any particular understanding of why this, to me, unusual occurrence might have taken place?
Mr. Christie, can you take the mic and please answer that question?
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. In regards to applications and therefore the applicant, it's not unusual, especially where a planning consultant or building professional is used. A number of times they will be the applicant for a development application, so it's not an unusual occurrence not to be the owner of the land. The owner of the land does have to provide their permission for an application to be made, but they don't have to be the applicant.
Thank you for that interpretation of planning law, but he hasn't answered the second question.
Which is, can you repeat it, please?
Does the relevant member of staff have any understanding of why the owner of this property was not the named person on the application for the DA?
Thank you. Mr. Christie?
For you, Mr. Mayor and the Chair, in regards to this, the application was made by a local planning consultant firm, being Habitat Planning. As indicated earlier, it's not unusual for when planning consultants or building professionals or members of the building industry are related to an application for the applicant to be that company.
Comfortable?
No, not yet. I have another question.
Yes.
I'm starting to feel like I might be Councillor King, but in actual fact I am Councillor Stutchbury. My next question is, so the name on the application for the DA is Habitat Planning, but when I was doing my Google research today, I read, and perhaps this was misreported, but I read that the name of the applicant was Jack Harvey. Now, am I wrong, or is Jack Harvey's name somewhere on this DA?
Mr. Christie?
For you, Mr. Mayor, I don't have, unfortunately, I might have to take that notice. I don't have the application form in front of me to confirm the precise name, but as I said, care of Habitat Planning is not unusual for applications that come from Habitat Planning.
I'm sorry, did you say that it's not unusual from Habitat Planning that the actual name of the person requesting the DA is not on the application?
Mr. Christie?
For you, Mr. Mayor, as I said earlier, again, Habitat Planning being building is professional. It's a number of times where the applicant is the company that is applying for the application, not necessarily the owner of the land. So no, it is not unusual.
I have a question for you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Do you think I've asked
Councillor
enough
Stutchbury.
questions?
I think you have. But you're permitted to ask them as you like, Councillor Stutchbury.
No, I'll call an end to my questions at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor King, have a question.
Yeah, question through you, Mr. Mayor, the relevant member of staff. Is there any alcohol being served on the premises at the moment?
Mr. Christie?
For you, Mr. Mayor, as far as we're aware, they do not have their liquor licence, and that part of their application for liquor licence requires the approval of this application for Liquor Gaming and Racing New South Wales to consider their application.
So, Mr. Christie, so you're saying that this DA DA is contingent also on them being able to apply for their liquor licence. Is that what you just said, or?
For you, Mr. Mayor, no, part of their application for a liquor licence is contingent upon this DA.
Yes.
Not part of this DA is contingent upon the liquor licence.
Yeah, but they are doing this. They are doing this expansion to apply for their liquor licence. Is that right?
No, the expansion also includes some internal alterations and changes.
Yeah.
But part of their application for a liquor licence needs to indicate a licensed area that's been endorsed through a council development application process.
Yeah.
And so they don't have one at the moment for the area they're applying for.
Which is mentioned in the report. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Glacken, did you wish to speak to this at all?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour, keep your hands raised. Thanks. We have Councillor Doxey, Councillor Conn, Councillor Glacken, Councillor Thurley. Those against, Councillor Stutchbury, Mack and King. The motion is carried. Thank you. Sam 8.2, report to the Engineering Works Committee meeting held on Monday the 9th of April. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As the Deputy Chair of that committee, I recommend that the recommendations included in the report from the Engineering and Works Committee meeting held on Monday, 9 April 2018 be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to second that?
Thank you. I'll second the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. There being no questions or debate, happy to put that. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. 8.3, report from the Community and Culture Committee meeting held on Monday the 16th of April 2018. Councillor Conn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the recommendations included in the report from the Community and Cultural Committee meeting held on Monday 16th of April 2018 be adopted.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Councillor Conn, do you wish to speak to that at all?
Only briefly to note that these recommendations include the funding under the Community and Cultural Grants program, and I'm really proud that Albury City is able to support such a wide variety of community groups, and also that the committee unanimously recommended an increase in that Community and Cultural Grants fund from $37,500 to $50,000 starting next year. Thank you.
Thank you. There being no further question or debate, happy to put that item. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM 8.4, reports from the Finance Administration Committee meeting held on Monday the 16th of April. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the recommendation included in the report from the Finance and Administration Committee meeting held on Monday 16th of April be adopted.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken.
Very happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, wish to speak to that at all?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I'm happy to put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. CM9, we have no reports from community forums. We have no notices of motion or notice of rescission. CM10, CM11, presentations and deputations. We have none. CM12, reports and minutes of committees and working parties. There are nil. CM13, we have one document for sealing, which is a late item. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council authorises its seal to be affixed to the documents outlined below in the presence of two signatories authorised to affix the seal pursuant to Regulation 400 of the Local Government General Regulation 2005 and the use of the Council seal policy. 1, the sale of Albury City's 99 Bennu Circuit Lot 462 Airport Park, Laguna to Ross Brindley Funerals Proprietary Limited, land transfer form and airport access deed.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, wish to speak to that at all?
I think it's a fairly routine matter, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Happy to put that item. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, CM14, officers' reports for consideration. The CM14.1, draft Albury City Community Fund budget. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that the recommendation that Council A adopt the following draft 2018-19 Albury City Community Fund project budget allocations. 1, UMCT Futures Committee, Ivan Memorial Museum feasibility study, $30,000. 2, West Albury Preschool Centre Master Plan, $12,500. 3, Urumba Early Learning Centre Master Plan facility upgrade, $395,000, including a 10-year interest-free loan of $75,000. And 4, City of Wodonga Regional Cricket Facility of a figure of $50,000. B, place the draft 2018-19 Albury City Community Fund budget on public exhibition as part of Council's draft 2018-19 operational plan.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Councillor Glacken.
I'm happy to second that recommendation, but just like to clarify that Councillor Doxey said City of Wodonga Regional Cricket Facility up to $50,000. Is that correct? Okay. Yep, happy to second that recommendation.
Up to 50 or is it 150?
My recommendation is $50,000.
Oh, so you've changed it. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Councillor Glacken, for bringing that to my attention. Councillor Doxey, do you wish to open debate on that item? Thanks.
No, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll wait for any argument.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Con, you wish to speak against? I have a speaker who wishes to ask a question. You happy for me to take the question? Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is directed to the relevant member of staff, I presume Mr Jenkins. Clearly the funding for this was predicated on Cricket New South Wales giving $200,000. As is common with this sort of stuff, it's in Victoria, so we're only going to give you $50,000. What's the fate of this development if council only puts in $50,000 on our side?
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Mr Jenkins.
So the options, through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. The options for this project are that the scope of the project is reduced by $150,000, which is the difference. The other option is that further funding is found from the current partners or new partners to the project. Or the third option would be that Wodonga Council identifies the shortfall in funding. If I can add that in the discussions that the Mayor and myself had with Cricket New South Wales the week before last, indicated that they were willing to perhaps stump up some more cash, but they wanted to do a value management study of the project to date. Cricket New South Wales have implemented some of these regional cricket facilities across the state, and so they have some knowledge of the outcome of the actual pricing of them in terms of delivery in certain areas in the city and in the country. They were reviewing the plans that had been developed and were planning to get back to the City of Wodonga with the feedback from that value management study that they'd done. So at this point in time, it's unclear whether there's a $150,000 or $200,000 shortfall or $150,000 shortfall until we get that further advice from both the City of Wodonga and Cricket New South Wales. However, having said that, I'm also hopeful that if there is a shortfall, that it could be addressed by Cricket New South Wales, and if Council was to view it that way, also Albury City Council making up whatever that shortfall is.
Councillor Thurley, do you wish to follow up? Comfortable? Oops. Councillor Glacken, you wish to speak for?
Correct. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wish to speak for this motion, but I also would like to ask a question. In speaking for, or to commence with the speaking for and then ask my question partway through, I think it's a great opportunity for cricket within our region, sport within our region, to have a joint facility. And I have been noted, I'm sure, as having been supportive of what is one community for the Albury-Wodonga cities. In fact, we're a larger community than that. We are a regional and a significant regional community. And we need to support all those organisations within our cities. However, I am mindful that we are regretfully also within two different states, and as has been exampled in our report, Cricket New South Wales have, as a gesture of goodwill, given an amount of funding to this project. And it is through their goodwill that this project will be, I believe, enabled. And I too believe that we, as a council, as a city, should provide assistance to Wodonga and this regional cricket facility. But as with Cricket New South Wales, I think we need to be we need to offer this gesture of goodwill, but also be cognizant of the fact that we are, in fact, in two states. We are, in fact, two cities, and we have two different councils. And so my question to the staff, and I will continue speaking for this motion in a moment, Mr Mayor, my question to the staff through you is, what examples do we have of this sort of collaboration where we have either provided funding previously for a facility in another local government area, indeed perhaps in Victoria, or examples where another local government area may have provided funding to us, and indeed perhaps from Wodonga through to Albury, because that would be a significant issue, would have been a significant event should that have happened. So I can only imagine that someone would be able to remember that. Mr Mayor.
Mr Jenkins? Come on. No. There you go. Try that one.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Glacken. I'm not aware of any co-funding for regional facilities across council boundaries to this point in time. My understanding is this would be the first one, but I'm also happy to be corrected if that's not the case.
Mr Zachney, do you have anything further to add?
Nothing further to add.
Councillor Gleick, do you wish to continue your debate?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. In essence, I do support us at providing a contribution to Wodonga for this regional cricket facility, but I'm hesitant about providing the amount that was requested. And I am also mindful of the fact that whilst it's been apparently promulgated in the local media, we as a council need to make these decisions. And I know that we have had a part of a briefing on this facility to the councillors, and I was at that briefing. However, regretfully, we haven't had a good opportunity to be able to discuss this as councillors. So I would like to suggest that should this motion be successful, that we could always review the amount of funding, just as Cricket New South Wales is going to do as well. I'm not saying that I would not support further funding at some stage. I am simply saying that at this point in time, I believe it's appropriate to offer, as a gesture of goodwill, what I believe is a significant amount of money, and we could review this later. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gleichen. I have 3 speakers against. I'll take a question. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question is to Councillor Doxey. Over the weekend, I received an email from Councillor Doxey bemoaning the lack of communication between councillors regarding possible amendments to the budget. And I didn't recall receiving an email from him about this particular amendment, and I'm just wondering if he forgot to email me his proposal.
This is a rhetorical question. Councillor Doxey, do you wish to answer that? Or?
No, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor
I have a question for Councillor Glacken now.
Yes.
So there's been no cross-border funding of projects as far as we're aware, based on the memory of Director Jenkins. The Two Cities, One Community agreement was signed only a few months ago. Is it really such a bad thing that we might make the first gesture of cross-border funding?
Councillor Gleichen, did you wish to answer that one?
No, it's part of the motion.
Thank you. We'll continue on. Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor King, you wish to speak against?
Yes, Councillor Stutchbury stole a bit of my thunder there. I think it shows complete narrow-mindedness on behalf of the movers for this. This document was signed, I think, in October for Two Cities, One Community, where we were going to work together. Now, this is the first project that has come up, and all of a sudden we're balking at it. I think Wodonga and the Wodonga Regional Cricket Facility has come to Albury because they have a shortfall of $150,000 because New South Wales board didn't contribute what they said they were going to. Councillor Glacken said that we are one community. But if we are one community, why are we balking at this? You know, Albury kids are going to play cricket at this facility. And we can only have one regional cricket facility in Albury-Wodonga, and this is going to be it. And this is our opportunity to be a part of it. And I'm really disappointed that at the first hurdle for this ongoing relationship that we have with Wodonga, we're arguing over this amount. And certainly, Councillor Doxey, I was blindsided by your bringing this up. I mentioned I think you've misread it, and clearly you hadn't. And I'm a bit disappointed that I wasn't aware of it, that you were going to change it.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Stutch, we have another question.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a question to the relevant member of staff.
Thank
you. My question is in two parts. Yes. The first part is, was $150,000 set aside in the budget for this particular proposal? And if so, what will become, assuming this motion or amendment is successful, what will happen to the $100,000 that's not expended upon this project?
Mr Jenkins. Mr Finlayson.
Through you, Mr Mayor, due to the timing of the preparation of the draft budget, as reflected in the report, the contribution towards the regional cricket facility wasn't included in the draft budget papers, although it was recommended that Council consider a contribution. As the asset will not be an asset of Albury City, any contribution that Albury City makes will be accounted for as an operating expense. For the purposes of Albury City's operational budget, that would add to the bottom line and would require an offsetting saving to be achieved during the next financial year to offset the cost of that contribution.
Thank you, Mr Finlayson. Councillor Stutchbury, happy with that?
Very happy, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Con, you wish to speak against?
I do, thank you, Mr Mayor, and I think I'm going to be echoing a lot of what Councillor King's already said. The community's waiting with bated breath to see if we really mean this Two Cities, One Community partnership. It's come to us to support a joint cricket facility with Wodonga, and this funding is not assistance to Wodonga, and it's not a gesture of goodwill. It's funding for a facility that the Albury community is going to use, and we absolutely should be funding. I am going to be voting against this motion, and I'd like to foreshadow an alternate motion should this be lost, which will be the original recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Con. Another speaker against, Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Two Cities, One Community, Albury-Wodonga Regional Cricket Facility. I'm appalled by Councillor Doxey for moving this amendment, and I'm appalled by Councillor Glacken for seconding it. And I'll be voting against it. I'll be appalled with the behaviour of any other councillor who votes against it as well.
Thank you for your appalling. Okay. There are no more speakers for or against. Only for me to say that given that it is Two Cities, One Community, it is something that we need to take quite seriously. The amount in this original motion was up to $150,000. It is a great example of, I think, 5 bodies coming together: Cricket Australia, Cricket Victoria, Cricket New South Wales, Albury-Wodonga councils, that's 5, and Cricket Albury-Wodonga. There's 6 organisations contributing to a wonderful regional facility. Cricket Albury-Wodonga is one of the biggest regional cricket leagues in this country. I think we need to take this Two Cities, One Community thing seriously. It is a regional facility. This is the start of a new era, so I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to close debate?
I think maybe Councillor Doxey might.
Oh, Councillor Doxey, sorry.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You know what we've done now? We've had discussion about the matter. We didn't have this before because it just appeared in our agenda and there was little detail apart from what was in the agenda. So at least we've had open debate about it, and I thank my fellow councillors. I am a little bit concerned about some of the language that was used but I think we can do better than that, and I look at fellow councillors to come better than what they've said. It's okay to say we're 2 cities, 1 community, and I agree with that, absolutely, no doubt about that. But let's go back a couple of years and think about the Albury-Wodonga Regional Cancer Facility, the cancer centre. We put $100,000 into that, I remind the councillors were on, and Wodonga put nothing into it, to my understanding, and nothing since. And they are residents of Wodonga that use the cancer facility. And the members of our community will go across to Wodonga and use the cricket facility. Great. I don't have a problem with that at all. And I thank Councillor Glacken for her support and the words she chose. But look at the original letter that came from the Mayor of Wodonga. It said a contribution up to $150,000. I've done that. I've put a figure of $50,000 on it. If you other councillors want to put, because you've been told if you don't do it, Councillor Sutry will be appalled at you. Don't be scared by that, please. Vote the way you believe you should. And if you knock it on the head, that's fine, but we've had debate about this. And I noticed later on in an agenda item, we've got the Albury-Wodonga pipes and drums. Again, they will appear on Anzac Day in Wodonga, but they're getting no contribution from Wodonga. I'm saying to get a feel, this is likely to be a one-way street, and I caution that because I don't think we'll see much coming across the border back this way. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. On that note, I'll put your motion. All those in favour? Those against? The motion is lost. Councillor Con?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the same motion with Part 4 reading City of Wodonga Regional Cricket Facility up to $150,000.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury?
I would very much like to second that
Thank you.
motion.
Councillor Con, did you wish to speak to that at all?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I wasn't going to, but I'd like the opportunity to respond to some of the comments made by Councillor Doxey. As I said previously, the community is waiting to see if we really mean this 2 cities, 1 community deal, or if it's going to devolve into bickering about funding, which I'm ashamed to see happening in this room tonight. There are lots of organisations in our community that are funded by Wodonga Council and not by us. I think the community doesn't want to see that sort of childishness from us. They want to see us work together, and I'm happy to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Con. No speakers against. I have a speaker for. Councillor King.
Just want to reiterate that signing of the document back in October was for us to move forward. So any historical to's and fro's about what happened in the past, I think, is irrelevant, and that we should all just move forward on this, vote for this, and hopefully we have the best Albury-Wodonga regional cricket facility in country Australia.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Stutchbury, speaker for.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, you wouldn't be surprised to find me speaking for this. I'm not quite sure why Councillor Doxey brought the Albury-Wodonga Regional Cancer Centre into the debate. The Albury-Wodonga Regional Cancer Centre is funded by the Victorian Department of Health, which fully funds Albury-Wodonga Health along with...
Yes, Councillor Thurley.
Is it appropriate that a councillor is debating the comments of another councillor or is he speaking for the motion?
Thank you. Good point, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Stutchbury,
I stand or sit chastened by that criticism and withdraw all of those previous comments and just reiterate that I'm very grateful to be in this position to vote for this particularly good motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there are no further speakers for or against. Councillor Con, do you wish to close debate?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I'm happy to put that. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, we have the CM 14.2. Mr. Jenkins is leaving. Yes, let the minutes reflect that Mr. Jenkins is leaving the room for this item. Seeing 14.2 draft 2018-19 financial assistance budget. We'll wait for the doors to close. Mover, Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A adopt the following draft 2018-2019 financial assistance schedule. I apologise that you're going to have to listen to me for quite a long time as I read out this list.
You're a very good reader.
Oh, thanks, Mr Mayor. The Albury Northside Chamber of Commerce, $137,415. Albury Entertainment Centre subsidised use, $15,000. Events, $58,117. Albury Northside Chamber of Commerce special promotional rate, $153,968. Economic Development Incentive Program, $300,000. Albury Wodonga Estedford, $26,426. Murray Arts, $30,688. Flying Fruit Fly Circus, $10,570. Flying Fruit Fly Foundation, $10,000 plus $30,000 in 2019-20. Murray Conservatorium, $10,570. Hothouse Theatre, $26,426. Albury City Band, $10,571. Westside Community Centre Incorporated, $69,573. Laguna Community Centre Incorporated, $118,308. Lavington Springdale Heights Community Centre, $38,204. Cultural grants, $25,000. Community grants, $25,000. Domestic violence fundraising and awareness raising, $5,000. Laguna Community Centre Incorporated Engaging Youth, $7,180. Laguna Community Centre Incorporated Interactive Playgroup, $15,240. Albury Wodonga Pipes and Drums, $4,500. Albury Conservation Company, $26,000 plus $26,000 in 2019-20 and $26,000 in 2020-21. Number 23, the Albury Wodonga Volunteer Resource Bureau, $50,600. And this is my only amendment from the recommendation put in the agenda by the staff, that Council supports this program for 3 years rather than 1 year and encourages the applicant to proactively explore additional funding opportunities through government and philanthropic sources. I feel a bit like Oprah reading this out. Survivors of Suicide and Friends, $3,500. Sports Albury, $45,000. Individual Athletes, $5,000. Community Safety, $100. Youth Events, $1,000. Library Museum, $800. Mama, $7,000. Leisure Facilities, $1,250. Sporting User Group Financial Assistance, $10,000. Executive Support, $5,000. Various non-profit organisations, $154,835 through subsidised rates and water not-profit organisations that lease council-owned premises. The Mayoral Discretionary Fund, $10,000. The Border Trust, $2,000. The Ivor Memorial Community Trust, $10,000. The Albury Waste Management Centre gate fees, $45,000. Engineering Services Management, $3,000. Hothouse Theatre, $11,563. Angel Flights, $300. Albury Showgrounds, $10,000. And the Albury and Border Rescue Squad, $2,000. And B, place the draft 2018-19 financial assistance schedule on public exhibition as part of Council's draft 2018-19 operational plan.
Well read, Councillor Con. I got you a glass of water while you were going through all that. Seconder is Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was a bit slow on the button, so I didn't have to do all that. I second the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Con, over speaker with a question. Did you wish to wait for the question before you open debate?
Question's fine.
Councillor Gleichen.
Thank you. Through you, can I ask for clarification as to which section, because I was trying to follow it through in our paperwork, Councillor Con, sorry, the mover of the motion, has varied?
Yes, Councillor Con.
Thanks, Councillor Glacken. I've amended one single item, which is the Albury Wodonga Volunteer Resource Bureau. They requested $50,600 per year for 3 years. The staff recommended funding only 1 year and then encouraging them to seek additional funding opportunities. My amendment is that we fund that program for all 3 years as requested by the group.
That clarification.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Question from Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just following on that particular one, we had a presentation here about a month ago, councillors might remember, from the Albury Wodonga Volunteer Resource Bureau. They were going to then speak with Wodonga. Has that happened at all, Mr Mayor?
Mr Zaknich.
We're not aware of that at this stage, Councillor Doxey. Sorry, we can find out.
Take that on notice. Councillor Doxey, do you have a follow-up at all?
I just the question related to the question I actually asked the person delivering the program was that are they going to speak to Wodonga and seek funding also? They said that at that stage they hadn't approached Wodonga to get a contribution. So that was my question. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. The manager is taking it on notice at this point. Councillor Glaken, did you wish to have a question?
Thank you. Just noting that that is a change or proposed change to the budget, and I'd like to highlight I am very supportive of that organisation. However, will it be, if we were to agree a 3-year funding program, would we do as we do with other organisations, and that is ask for a certain agreement for the 3 years, and it would be based on key performance criteria, etc., to bring them in line with other organisations that have significant funding over a number of years, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Sacknich.
Thanks for the question through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's the case, Councillor Gracken. There'd be a 3-year funding agreement with performance indicators, so an agreed performance plan over that period.
Thank you.
Councillor Thurley, you speak for?
Yes, I support the motion and especially that amendment. The problem is if we give 1-year funding and they're uncertain for the next 2 years, it will probably influence the program they develop, and it will be a program that could be terminated at the end of 1 year. And what we really want them to do is feel that they have continuity and they can put a worthwhile program in place that can grow over the 3 years. And so this is why I support the motion with that amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Glacken, you have another question?
Thank you. Through you to the most relevant member of staff. Noting again that this is a change, and I don't wish to suggest that I do not support this organisation, but noting that this is a change, and over the next 2 years it will be over $100,000. If we were to agree this tonight, can I seek clarification from the most relevant member of staff that other programmed organisations, other programmed works within the budget over the next 2 years will not be affected, whilst it appears only to be $50,300 per year. I'd just like clarification that nothing else will need to be bumped, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Finlayson.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the projected contributions towards the Volunteer Resource Bureau have been reflected in AlburyCity's 4-year delivery program. So the answer is no other programs will need to be affected by approving an allocation of 3 years.
Councillor Glacken, you comfortable with that? Thank you. Councillor Con, do you wish to open debate or close debate on that issue?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I think Councillor Thurley hit the nail on the head. It's a huge ask for organisations that are mostly run by volunteers to submit funding grants every year, and it really limits the amount of planning that they can do for their organisation. So I feel very strongly about funding this particular group for 3 years to give them that funding certainty. Look, I think it could be argued that every fantastic organisation on this list also benefits residents of Wodonga, and I think it could be argued that every community program that Wodonga Council supports benefits us. I wouldn't want to have to put every community group in town through the bureaucracy of applying to both councils every time, and I'm very happy to be supporting this list.
Thank you, Councillor Con. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 14.3, the draft 2018-19 operational plan, draft 18 to 22 4-year delivery program, and draft long-term financial plan 2018-2028. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move that Council A adopt the draft 2018-2019 operational plan, the draft 2018 to 2022 4-year delivery program, and the draft long-term financial plan for 2018-2028 with the following amendments. Number 1, bring forward Albury Swim Centre upgrades from year 3 to year 1. Number 2, bring forward improvements to the roundabout at Thaguna Drive and Elizabeth Mitchell Drive from years 3 and 4 to years 1 and 2. 3, bring forward reconstruction of Ian Barker Fields to years 2 and 3 from year 3 and 4. Number 4, remove the roundabout at Saguna Street and Dean Street from new initiatives years 1 to 4. And 5, defer construction costs for years 2 to 4 of Kerr Road, stages 6 to 8, to enable investigation, purchase, design and construction of the western section of Kerr Road between Tabletop Road and the Hume Freeway at Davey Road. B, place the draft plans on public exhibition for 28 days, concluding on Friday 25th of May. And C, consider any submission received at a meeting of council to be held on Tuesday the 12th of June prior to final adoption of the plans.
Thank you, Councillor Con. That's your motion on the board, your amendment. Councillor King.
Happy to second that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, Councillor Con, before we open debate. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Everyone will have noted that Councillor Vanderven is not present tonight, but he asked me would I move an additional amendment. So I'm asking whether Councillor Con and Councillor King would accept that the amendment, the reallocation of Mudge Street rebuild from Centaur Road to Tip Road from year 4 and 5 to year 3 and 4. I move it simply that on the understanding that it will get debated. Whether it succeeds or fails is neither here nor there to me.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Con.
Thanks, Councillor Thurley, for that. Look, I won't accept the amendment as is. I think we should probably debate that item separately and see whether we agree if it's a priority.
Thank you, Councillor Con. Councillor King, have the same view?
I'd probably need a bit more detail. I mean, I'm happy to go for it, but I probably need a bit more.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Con, still two more questions. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Noting these changes, noting this documentation I have, do the staff have some detail on the financial implications? Might there be some work that's gone on in the background by what that might enlighten us as to how that will affect the budget as we move through into the iterations of the budget?
Thank you for the question. Mr Finlayson.
Through you, Mr Mayor, my interpretation of the proposed amendments as detailed are that largely they will require an increase in capital expenditure in the first 2 years, although they can be accommodated within council's budget due to the Albury City's capacity. And just to be clear, my interpretation of the change regarding Kerr Road is that it's a change of focus from years 2 and 4 of the proposed expenditure in that period, rather than a change in capital budget as such, but open to be corrected.
Can I ask, have the staff been able to look at the figures and how that will pan out into with the budgets as they progress? And in a similar vein to the question I asked previously with regards to the Volunteer Bureau, what effect will that have on the budgets, and will there be anything that needs to be, again, bumped or moved to accommodate these requests from the councillors?
Mr Finlayson.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr Mayor. In preparing Albury City's budget, the intention is to maintain financial capacity to accommodate opportunities as they arise. The impact of in the first 2 years is an increase in capital expenditure of $1 million in year 1 and $1 million in year 2, and then decreased expenditure in years 3 and 4. Due to the capacity built into the draft budget papers, the budget can accommodate these changes without breaching any of the prudential benchmarks as set by the state government for local government.
Yes, Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And just to confirm that there will be no need to move anything from those projected works for the next 2 years to incorporate those, having taken things out of 3 and 4, Mr Mayor.
Mr Finlayson.
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr Mayor. This will result in a change in the profile of expenditure over that 4-year period, but it will not impact any other works.
Comfortable with that?
I believe that answers it about the works, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Such, you have a question?
I was wondering, Mr Mayor,
Yes.
if the mover and seconder of this motion would accept a late amendment. And I apologise to Councillor Doxey. It's just a late thought bubble, so I haven't had the chance to.
So what I'd probably suggest, and you've just brought it to my attention before I deal with this one, Councillor Thurley, did you have any desire to put that other motion as an amendment for the Mudge Street, to have it debated prior to this motion being put?
Look, I'm happy to have it debated. Councillor Van Ven wanted this matter, so if it's debated and falls over or gets up, it doesn't particularly matter.
Thank you.
It can be debated.
So I'm happy for you to start that discussion, and Councillor Stutchby, you can do the same and get a seconder for your motion. I think to keep it tidy, we should do it separately. Yes. So we get a seconder for Councillor Thurley when we get the amendment on the board. Thanks.
I'm happy to. Do we need a seconder? I'm happy to second that.
Yes, Councillor
So
Thurley.
it can be debated.
Yes.
Because I don't understand what we're meant to do.
Okay. Councillor Glacken.
Happy to second the amendment
Thank you.
put forward by Councillor Thurley, because I would like to hear what the amendment actually is and what that works encompasses.
Thank you. So we're debating item 6, reallocation Mudge Street and Mudge Street rebuild from Centre Road to Tip Road from years 4 and 5 to years 3 and 4. Thank you, Councillor Thurley.
Basically, Mudge Street at some stage will need some money spent on it. I understand that Councillor Vanderman's concern is that it will need the money spent sooner than years 4 and 5. I don't have a strong feeling that that is the case. I think there are more important issues, in fact, with Mudge Street, which relate to ownership of land and realignment of the road. It seems to me that the existing work schedule would be adequate. So although I've moved and talking, I appear to be talking against the motion, but at least it's being discussed.
No, I appreciate respecting Councillor Vanderman's will. Councillor Glacken, you have a question?
I do. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to the most relevant member of staff, there are 2 questions I'd like to ask. One is that since we've brought other things forward into 1 and 2 with the first part of the changes to the recommendation, staff recommendation, and that left vacancies or left gaps in years 3 and 4, this in theory would fit into that area that's been left vacant. However, so that's my first question, is that correct? And my second question is more a works program question to the most relevant member of staff, so not the financial first question. Is the suggestion by Councillor Thurley that perhaps the works program is not would not be able to include this being brought forward simply because other components of that works program have not been undertaken to facilitate it being brought forward? And if we did that, we would have to then bring forward other activities to enable this one to happen. Mr Mayor.
Thanks for the question, Mr Ferris and Mr Finlayson. Mr Finlayson, you can go first.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. On the first part, the financial effect of such a change, yes, that move from 4 and 5 of expenditure to 3 and 4 would be in a period where we had otherwise reduced some expenditure, and that change can be accommodated within the draft budget. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Finlayson. Mr Ferris, designed on the road.
Mr Mayor, certainly with the design program, that road, as alluded to by Councillor Thurley, it's more about a realignment of the sharp bend that then heads from Centaur Road to Mudge Street and down to the entrance to the Waste Management Centre. So there's significant works around land acquisition and design and approvals for that process. Just being mindful of the workload, we planned it for 4 and 5 so that we could address that. If it was the will of council to bring that forward, we would need to bring those acquisition and design and approval works forward as well.
Thank you, Mr Ferris. Councillor Gleick, you happy with that?
Thank you. However, I'd just like to query, if I may,
Yes.
the motion we have on the board. I think the amendment is Councillor Thurley and Councillor Glacken, and the original motion was Councillor Con and another councillor. I think we're melding the
Yes, I see what you're saying. Well picked up. We'll just fix that. It was Councillor Con and Councillor Stutfield, I believe, wasn't it? No? Who was it? Councillor King. Moved the original amendment, yes.
Yep, I think that's correct now. Thank you.
This is the second amendment, which is 6. Thank you. Okay. Just waiting for the... That's this one, yes? Excellent. Councillor Con, wish to speak against?
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I also wanted to thank Councillor Thurley for bringing this forward. In Councillor Vanderven's absence, I'm glad that we have a level of camaraderie amongst the councillor group that we're giving him the benefit of a debate. I personally don't see this particular project as a high priority, and it's not one that's been raised with me by any members of the community, so I don't particularly have a good reason to bring it forward.
Thank you, Councillor Con. No further questions or debate. I would just like to value add, Councillor Vanderven spoke to me about this project prior to this evening and was very adamant that he felt that given the scope of works that has occurred at the landfill and the scope of advancement that has occurred in that precinct, there is a lot of vehicular movement into that area, and it is, in his words, a disgrace that the road is in that condition. Whilst I accept that momentarily, I do agree with what Mr Ferris said, that there's a lot of work to be done prior to this particular project being enabled, but I would still support this motion on the basis that it is Councillor Vanderven's motion. He feels strongly about it, and I think it's a strong motion as well. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Thurley, you have a question, or did you wish to close?
It's just a procedural matter, Mr Mayor. If this motion as it exists, 1 to 6, is voted down, does Councillor Con's original motion become the motion? Okay.
Yes, it does. Yeah, we're actually voting on the amendment, which is reallocation of Mudge Street rebuild at this point. So I'm happy to. Are you happy to close debate on that, Councillor Thurley? You're comfortable?
Leave it as it is.
So, councillors, just to clear, we are voting on the amendment number 6, reallocation of Mudge Street rebuild. All those in favour?
Sorry, Mr Mayor,
yes.
6 only.
6 only.
In isolation.
That's right. 6 in isolation. So, all those in favour of the amendment?
No, we're voting, Mr Mayor, we're voting for the amended
motion,
which is the one on the board in its entirety.
Okay.
If that falls over, the original motion
stands. Okay, let's put that motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried.
So the amendment becomes the motion.
The amendment becomes a motion. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Stutchbury, you had an amendment to that as well?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I apologise for this late putting of an amendment. I would like to amend the 4-year budget to include a number 7, and the number 7 would have parts A and B. Part A would read, include a sports field lighting and power upgrade for Bunton Park to be included in the year 3 and 4 of the budget to the value of $166,533. And part B would read that the sports field lighting power upgrade for Albury Sports Ground to be deferred from Year 4 to Year 5.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. We'll just wait for the ladies. How rudimentary. Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. A second for that amendment, Councillor King.
Happy to second the motion, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, do you wish to open debate on that item?
No, I'll hold back on that.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. It relates to item 7. Include a sports field lighting and power upgrade for Bunton Park to be included in Year 3 and 4 to the value of $166,533. Can I ask to the most relevant member of staff, whilst we spend a long time looking at all these documents, can we be given an appraisal of to where that request is at the moment? And what effect that would have on the program? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Thank you for the question. Mr Jenkins.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Glacken. Bunton Park has identified that they can do a lighting upgrade for 2 of the poles at the Bunton Park ground, and that currently that was located in Year 5 of the budget, which is not that visible to people, but and it was also included in the recent Stronger Country Communities funding options that the community voted on. It was listed there because it was a project that could proceed within a 12 to 24 month period. However, it was included in that Stronger Country Communities funding because we didn't have it in our 4-year delivery program, so that was why it was included. Certainly this can be accommodated in the budget, particularly if the Albury Sports Ground is deferred from Year 4. The Albury Sports Ground lighting power upgrade was $250,000, and so that would certainly leave room to accommodate the Bunton Park works if that's the way Council wished to proceed.
Further
Mr
question?
Mayor, ask a follow-up question. With regards to the Bunton Park, and thank you for refreshing my memory, that was part of a presentation we did have recently. With reference to the Bunton Park proposal and the funding that we would otherwise hope to have attracted that would include this as a component, when would we expect to hear from, if this was not part of our budget, when would we expect to hear from the New South Wales government for that? And what are the implications of us including that figure, that project in this budget tonight, if we were to agree that? Thank you.
Mr Jenkins.
Through you, Mr Mayor, and my apologies if I've misled you, Councillor Glacken. Even though it was one of the projects, the 15 projects that were listed for community consultation, it was one of the projects that wasn't, didn't make the list of projects that Council is applying to the New South Wales Government for under that funding scheme. So at this stage, unless Council agrees to do the work, or if Council agrees to do the work in years 3 and 4 through the budget process, that's the only way at this stage that it would occur. In the process that was applied to the Stronger Country Communities funding, the North Albury Football Club and the North Albury Sports Club didn't have any money to apply to this project. So unless Council puts money towards it, it won't proceed at this stage.
Thank you for the answer. That clarifies it. Thank you. Yep.
Just one from me, Mr Jenkins. The fact that this has been put to year 3 and 4, if there are other rounds of the Stronger Country Communities funding, we could still include this if it was a preferred project? No?
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, not as the funding criteria is currently laid out. We have to identify projects that Council are not currently preparing to fund in the 4-year period.
It wouldn't preclude the Albury Sports Club or ourselves applying to Sports and Rec for funding, though, if there was an opportunity?
Through you, Mr Mayor, no, it does. We would be able to apply to other funds for this contribution towards this project. It wouldn't fit, probably wouldn't fit the regional sporting, New South Wales Department of Sport and Recreation Regional Sporting Fund, but it may apply to some other funding streams that are currently available.
Thank you, Mr Jenkins. Councillor King, you wish to speak for?
Just want to commend Councillor Stutchbury for this motion. Often we hear a lot about the Lamington Sports Ground and the Albury Sports Ground, but we don't hear too much about the North Albury Sports Ground, and we have to remember that there's 3 AFL teams in Albury, not just 2, and that that the North Albury Football Club has had its troubles in its time, and it's come out the other end okay, and it's good to see that we're supporting one of the 3 AFL teams in the grounds in Albury with this initiative.
Thank you, Councillor King. I have another speaker for, but I've got a question from Councillor Glacken.
Sorry, can I just, Mr Mayor, through you, to seek clarification. Councillor King just said we have 3 AFL clubs. My understanding is we have 4 clubs that play AFL in our areas. Is that correct? We've got Albury.
5.
Yes, there's more than 3. Yes.
Yeah, there's 5. Murray Magpies, Laguna, Albury, North Albury and
Lamington. Okay, thank you. And I think 2 share a field. No, they all have their own. Okay, thank you. Yep.
Councillor Thurley, you wish to speak for?
The whole motion I'm speaking for, not just on the one little bit. I'm in favour of all of these things being changed from what was originally set out in the budget. They, as Mr Finlayson said, have very little financial impact, and Council has the ability to finance all of these. It moves the capital expenditure from a couple of years to a different time, but that's not difficult. We certainly wouldn't breach any of the prudential requirements, unrestricted capital ratios and so on. So I support this. I only have concerns about number 5. Number 5 is this construction of Kerr Road, and bringing it forward is, in some senses, in my opinion, a little bit of a symbolic or token effort, because nothing much will happen for some considerable time. We have to do land acquisition, We will have to do studies with relation to vegetation and woodlands. We'll have to do studies relating to Indigenous artefacts and cultural heritage. So I don't have a problem with it, but I think if we are regarding this as some answer to Thagoonda's traffic issues, then I think we're living in a different land. But I support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor Con, you wish to speak for?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think this is a great motion. I'm going to speak for all parts of it together. The staff have put in an enormous amount of work behind the scenes, and I think it's a testament to them that with a book the size of the one Councillor Glacken showed us a couple of times tonight, we're amending 7 lines of it. So I do want to commend the staff for all the work that they've put in. Look, I've spent some time out and about in the community talking to people, and these were a few projects that I thought were higher or lower priorities than the staff have put in the book. I'm happy to support the amendments that have been put in by other councillors, and I look forward to hearing what the community thinks when we meet on the 12th of June.
Thank you, Councillor Con. I'd just like to reiterate your thoughts. I think the staff and the council have worked really hard on this budget. It's been always a challenging process. It takes a good 3 months of discussion and workshops to get this work on the board, but if you look at the size of this folder, the staff have put all that together in record time, I would think, and it certainly does speak volumes for what they do and what they do for our community, and it's a credit to them. But I do support this particular motion and the amendments. I think the councillors are all entitled to their input into the budget, and I think Bunton Park is certainly one of those clubs that currently needs assistance, and if we give them the opportunity in 3 and 4, potentially between now and then, they could look at this as an opportunity to fundraise, and we have a master plan coming for them in the next couple of months. They could see this as an opportunity to also value add to that. So thank you, councillors. Councillor Stutch, do you wish to close debate on this?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Only to say that I too congratulate the staff on their hard work on the budget, and I congratulate my fellow councillors on their work on these amendments, which I think are all worthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. On that note, I'm happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you.
That's the amendment. Now the amendment becomes the motion.
Now the amendment has become the motion, so Councillor Con, back to you, I suppose.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it's all been said.
Thank you. Being no further question on debate, happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Congratulations, councillors. CM 14.4, Development Application 10.2017.35848.1, 2 Diamond Drive, Thagoona, Service Station, Convenience Store, Restaurant, Signage, and 2 Lot Torrens title staged. Thank you, Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to move the recommendation that Council A receive and note the contents of this report, and B, grant consent to Development Application 10.2017.35848.1 for lot 400 DP 1237616 Diamond Drive, Thagoona, subject to the conditions contained in the development determination shown in attachment 5 to this report. And I'd like to speak to that. Should I get a second?
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Glacken, just have a question from Councillor Thurley. Happy for me to take that. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The question's a bit of a technical one. There were a number of submissions, and one at least raised the issue of lighting. Can I ask the relevant staff member, do we assess applications of this nature using Australian Standard 4282, which is the obtrusive effects of outdoor lighting?
Mr Christie.
Thank you for the question for you, Mr Mayor. Yes, we do, and a number of times we'll impose a condition accordingly.
Comfortable with that, Councillor Thurley?
Thank you, yes.
Yep. Councillor Glacken, your statement debate.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I support this recommendation from the staff, and I do so knowing that not everyone in our community will be happy with this, not everyone in Thurgoona or in other parts of Albury will be happy with this development. However, I do support it on the grounds that it is a development such as this enables the people who do live in Thurgoona or beyond Thurgoona to access facilities and services that they otherwise have to travel significantly greater distances for. At some stage, somewhere in that growing corridor, we will need to have these facilities and services. And I believe that we need to be supporting this application at this time to enable the growth and development of that precinct to continue. I am mindful, as I said earlier, that not everyone is happy with this. I'm conscious of the fact that the draft determination has some conditions that are contained in it, and I believe that those are appropriate for this development. And so I look to our councillors around the table to support what is something that is required in this growing and developing area. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Con, Speaker against.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I am going to speak against this motion. And firstly, to note that I don't oppose growth and development in Thurgoona. I completely understand that our residents need to have services. But this area was identified as a major neighbourhood centre in the Thurgoona-Willinga Precinct Structure Plan. And this application doesn't meet a number of the requirements of that plan. We are shortly to be considering a development application for the adjacent lot, and so this development application and the adjacent lot form the whole of the major neighbourhood centre. I note that a number of concessions are being proposed to this developer for not meeting those requirements, and in exchange they'll be making a financial contribution. I'd really like to look at both lots together, and councillors haven't received the detail of the adjacent lot. I think it's really critical that we see what the whole major neighbourhood centre is going to look like before we go ahead and approve a development on this lot that doesn't meet what we've promised the Thurgoona community in the Thurgoona-Willinga Precinct Structure Plan. So I'll be voting against this motion tonight, and should this motion fail, I'll be moving an alternate motion that we defer this development application to be considered at the same council meeting as the adjacent development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Con. I have two speakers for, but a question from Councillor Thurley. Councillor Thurley.
This is another sort of technical question which relates to Councillor Con's suggestion that if this motion fails, she will move that it be deferred. It's my understanding that the time that this application has already been on display and in train would mean that if we deferred it tonight, it would be deemed refusal because of the elapsed time under whatever part of the EPA regulation.
Mr Christie.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr Mayor. So under the Environmental Plan and Assessment Act, Council does have statutory timeframes in which we're meant to determine applications, otherwise they can be classified as what's called deemed refusal. And if an application is classified as deemed refusal, it does allow an applicant a right to appeal that decision and deemed refusal at the Land Environment Court. For local development, which this application is, which doesn't require government agency approval, it's 42 days from date of receipt of the application, excluding any time that we ask for additional information from the applicant. In this case, the application's been in since 19th of December, and including 2 periods of public notification, has exceeded that 42-day period at this point in time.
Thank you, Mr Christie. Councillor Thurley, need any further? No? Thank you. Speaker 4, Councillor Doxey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Unlike most councillors here, I lived in Thurgoona, and whilst I was a councillor for my first 3 years, I was constantly being asked by fellow residents out there when we're going to get a service station on this side of the freeway. Well, here's an opportunity. The thing that concerns me is the delay in approving this under the DA. And as Mr Christie said, we're at a critical time now, and I thank Councillor Thurley for raising that. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Another speaker 4, Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you for the opportunity of allowing me to speak for this motion, Mr Mayor. Now, just like Councillor Doxey, I did used to live in Thurgoona. I lived in Thurgoona 20 years ago, and Thurgoona had a petrol station right next to the IGA, which were both razed to the ground and replaced by a building full of poker a supermarket. Thurgoona needs its own service station. I guess based on what I see going on around me, it probably needs its own fast food outlet. That's debatable. The DA is requesting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The location is a major thoroughfare, not a suburban street. I don't think that's inappropriate. And I believe that the other planning provisions are allowed for in the attached letter. So I'd be pretty keen to see this application move forwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stush. We have a question. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My questions for the relevant member of staff, please. If we were to defer this item tonight, what would be the expected time frame for us to be able to revisit it with the adjacent DA?
Mr Sacknage.
Thank you, through Mr Mayor, for the question. We're looking to, now that we've received further documentation regarding the other application on Diamond Drive, in discussions with the Mayor, we'd look to deal with that application on the 14th of May at an extraordinary meeting of Council on the committee evening meetings. And that's only just come to light in the last couple of hours this afternoon. So that would be the next available opportunity if Council were to resolve to defer this application this evening.
Councillor Con, do you have a follow-up? Thank you. No further questions or debate. Councillor Glacken, did you wish to close debate?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, and councillors, I see no reason why we should delay this application. It is needed. It's a requirement it's been expressed as a requirement by people who live in that area, and I have heard for years people saying that they look forward to such a development. I believe it's timely for us to approve this tonight, and I thank councillors who have spoken for this motion tonight for their support and their being able to express why it is that they believe that we should be supporting this. And also I thank Councillor Thurley for his question about the timeliness of this application and what would happen should we not indeed deal with that this evening. So I ask councillors to consider all of those points quite carefully and also acknowledge the fact that this is part of our development area. This is part of what is required, what our people and our community expect to be out there, and for the fact also that Councillor Stushby has reminded us that there was originally a petrol station out there. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Happy to put the motion and leave your hands raised. Thanks, councillors. All those in favour? Councillors Stutchbury, Doxey, Mac, Glacken and Thurley. All those against? Councillors Con and King. The motion is carried. Thanks, councillors. CM 14.5 Energy Savings Action Plan 2018 to 2022. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council endorses the Energy Saving Action Plan 2018 to 2022 and consider the implementation schedule in conjunction with the 4-year budget.
Councillor Con.
Happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley, do you wish to speak to that?
Very briefly, I think this is justification of some work that began in the last council, mainly pushed very hard by Councillor Van der Ven. And as a result, we've seen a fairly big implementation of solar power in Albury and a number of other initiatives which are power-saving initiatives. And the staff are especially to be complimented on this one. I know Mr Dudley has worked very hard on a whole heap of things in this space, and I commend the report.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 14.6, the Joint Aquatics Management Tender. Thank you, councillors. Councillor Stutchbury.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to move that Council accepts the tender from Aligned Leisure Proprietary Limited, tender number W1224-17, for provision of management services for the operation of Albury aquatic facilities for a 5-year period commencing 1st July 2018 for the contract sum of $3,204,120.40, excluding GST.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury, before you open the debate, I have a question. Happy for me to take the question?
Very happy.
Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I actually have a number of questions, if I may, and I'll try to ask them in this session. If not, I'll put my light on again. Can I confirm the figure in the document of 3.2 million over 5 years? So is that 20% of that figure per year? Is my first question, Mr Mayor.
Mr Jenkins.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, that's correct. The annual figure will be 20% of that per year.
And can I confirm, please, is that just for the Albury sites?
Councillor Mr Jenkins.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, that's for the Albury Swim Centre and the Lavington Swim Centre management.
Thank you. And how does that compare to the previous annual costs, noting that the costing has changed and it's shifted because the new contract on page 114, I'm reading here, the first dot point in the second half of the page. The contract specification now includes that management will be responsible for all costs associated with the purchase and delivery, etc., etc.
Mr Jenkins.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I haven't actually got the exact figure for what the pools are costing at us this year. I'd have to take that question on notice. But certainly the amount that has been tendered is approximately $72,000 a year more than we have currently in our budget. As highlighted in the report, that may not be the figure that we are charged, depending on whether there's a profit share arrangement comes into play, and that will be dependent on a number of factors that occur during the term of the contract. But unfortunately, I'd have to take that question on notice in terms of what the current financial cost of Albury pools are.
Councillor Glacken.
Thank you. Part of the answer given, and thank you, Mr Jenkins, part of the answer given stated $72,000 more per year as cost to council. So that means, therefore, that I believe that would be inclusive of them now purchasing the services. So the overall cost will be $72,000 more. My next question, if that's correct, yep, thank you. My next question is then, what are the entry fees going to be for people wishing to use our facilities? Because I don't think that is in the report. I know there were lots of documents, and I must admit that I wasn't able to download all of them. I've spoken to IT today. My device would not allow me to download all of the documentation. So I openly acknowledge I may not have found this in a document that I have not been able to open.
Mr Jenkins.
Through you, Mr Mayor. The entry fees weren't included in any of the documentation provided. So entry fees under the current contract were set by the contractor in conjunction with users and council staff. Under the contract going forward, once again, the contractor would be responsible for setting the fees, and I would believe would be cognizant of the views of users and the council staff in setting those fees. We're also aware that in the particular case of at least two of the applicants, they in the tender process, they had extensive programs which would be attractive to users, and they will have a different range of pricing mechanisms to the current standard pricing mechanisms we've got at the moment, which includes things like access across all full pools for one membership. There was also things such as multi-pass access to the pool where a special fee would apply. So I can't tell you exactly what the fees are that they are going to apply, but it will be done in conjunction with council staff and the users.
Okay. Councillor King, you wish to speak for?
Yes, I'd like to say this is another good example of the two cities coming together and having the facilities in a joint effort, and hopefully this will be the start of more things to come. Certainly in regards to things that we do together with facilities and road management, and I commend both Albury and Wodonga for actually having the foresight to bring this, and again, we're moving forward with this Two Cities, One Community.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Stutch, would you wish to close debate?
I don't even recall opening debate, but I'm happy to close it.
You can open and close.
Yes, I'd like to open and close. Look, this is really a very pleasant task. This evening, Wodonga Council voted for the same company to manage their aquatic facilities. It's an excellent example of two cities, one community, and cross-border collaboration. And all three tenders were high quality, but this one from Allied Leisure really stood out as being extra special, and I'm very pleased to put this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchby. On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 14.7, the draft activities on public land and roads framework. Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council receive and note the report on the draft activities on public land and roads framework, and B, receive and endorse the draft activities on public land and roads framework and place it on public exhibition for a period of 28 days.
Thank you. Seconder, thanks. Councillor King.
Second the motion, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thurley.
Not much to say except that in the presentation that was given to us at a workshop, it's clarified a number of issues in the city about what activities are and are not allowed and in what circumstances. It'll be interesting to see the feedback we get from the community, and I await that.
Thank you, Councillor Thurley. Councillor King, you wish to speak for?
Yes, just want to echo those sentiments that finally we're getting forward with outdoor activities. We've got some fantastic locations in Albury, especially along the river, and certainly QE2 Square as well. And we need to showcase that to people. I should make a comment that over Easter I went for a drive down to Noriel, and the facility there wasn't open. There must have been 1,000 people on Noriel Park, or at Noriel Park in the peninsula, and certainly up on the Australia Park, all having barbecues, all out in the sun, having a great time. And if we can get the food vans and get the place activated, and what traders may say, well, you're taking that type of activity away from us. Well, there was no competition to any traders of Albury down there, and the only one wasn't open, yet there was still 1,000 people down there. So, and I commend this, and hopefully we can get it up and running by next Easter, and everyone will have a good time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Thurley, you wish to close debate?
I think he was
happy to put the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. The 14.8 Albury Development Control Plan 2010 Review of Development Notification Provisions. Councillor Con.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Council A receive and note the report and B, endorse the amendment to Appendix B, Development Notification Provisions of the Albury Development Control Plan 2010.
Thank you. Councillor Stutchbury.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I would like to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Stutchbury. Councillor Con, do you wish to speak to that?
No, thanks, Mr Mayor. It's pretty administrative.
Thank you. Happy to put the motion. We have a division. All those in favour? We have Councillor Stutchbury, Councillor Doxey, Councillor Mack, Councillor Con, Councillor King, Councillor Glacken and Councillor Thurley. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Officers' reports for noting 15.1 events resourcing. Thank you. Councillor King.
Yes, I'd like to put the recommendation.
Yeah.
Where is it? The council receive and note the event resourcing report.
Thank you. Councillor Doxey.
Happy to second, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor King, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yeah, look, when I came to council about 18 months ago, I noticed that Albury had a number of events coming to town. I certainly think that we can improve on that and to adequately resource our events team. We're in, again, a fantastic location. Every weekend I've seen a lot of sort of motor activities. We've had the Kaisers on the Murray locally. We've had there was a Volkswagen Combi show down at Australia Park the other day. We've had Morris Miners, and with the other strategy in place with the convention centre being upgraded, I think we need to follow that with the personnel, and that certainly Albury can become the destination place for a lot of bigger and better events, and certainly need to resource that in its embryonic stage to build that.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Doxey, wish to speak for?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to endorse that the events team do a terrific job. I try and get to all the music in the gardens, and sometimes that can be in extreme adverse conditions, either heat or rain, and they do a great job down there, particularly on a Sunday. I try and get to what citizenship ceremonies I can get to, and also they do a great job there. And they also run the QE2 Twilight Markers too, so the staff do a great job on the events team, and I want to congratulate them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Doxey. Councillor King, do you wish to close debate?
No, I think I've said that enough.
Thank you. Happy to put that. All those in favour? Anyone against? The motion is carried. Delegates' reports for noting 16, CM16, there are none. Notices of urgent business, CM17, we have none. CM18, confidential matters. I need someone to move us into confidential. Councillor Glacken.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to wait for the motion to come to the board. I would like to move that we move into, move into confidential on the basis that, thank you, that council move into confidential, discuss item CM 18.1, as this is confidential items exclusive of press and public, on the grounds that the material relates to confidential information of a confidential nature that would, if disclosed, prejudice the commercial position of the person who supplied it. And thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to ask for a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Glacken. Councillor Thurley.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. I just need to ask if there are any statements or submissions from the public regarding the reasons as identified for these confidential items, CM 18.1. There are no submissions. We need to clear the chamber. Thank you, Mr Christie. We're back in open council, and I'd like to put the resolution that was discussed in confidential, is that council authorise the general manager to negotiate directly with LMS Energy on amending the existing public-private partnership with LMS Energy to include the solar farm based on a fixed licence fee and the provision of an electric vehicle recharging station. Moved by Councillor Stutchby and seconded by Councillor Doxey, and it was carried. Thank you, councillors. Meeting closed at 7:53. We'll have a short recess. There are chocolate royales in the council meeting room.